Hey everybody, welcome to a new lesson. And today I'm very excited. Like I can't even wait myself to see Speckle again in action, because Speckle is a tool that I keep promoting, I keep talking about, because in my opinion, it's the future of the AEC. It's the future of how we're gonna interconnect data and software and apps. But again, we're gonna talk for the whole hour about this. And actually, I had a client a few weeks ago that after they learned about Speckle, they said that this is BIM how it was supposed to be. So today with me, I have my good friend and the Speckle advocate, so to speak, but also part-time shepherd, right? Jonathon.
That's right. Yep.
Jonathon,
Good to see
welcome.
you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you so much for doing this. So welcome, and maybe you can just tell us a bit about yourself, and like about Speckle, like just a general intro, like what problem is Speckle solving for who and how?
Yeah, for sure. Part of my usual description of Speckle is basically describing myself as well anyway. So I've worked as an architect, master planner, BIM data analyst over 25 years before joining Speckle. What I was dealing with, particularly working on large-scale master plans, so central London schemes, post-Olympics, transformation, large rail infrastructure, so dealing with, well, because I've been around a long time, CAD, Excel, and then latterly then moving into BIM, GIS platforms, etc. I was always dealing with other people's data. So from my perspective, it was always sort of discovered Speckle from a point of view of I have a lot of data to manage. It's unmanageable in some ways because everyone authors things different ways, not only in different software, but actually people author things in different ways. You're just the same as you get sort of a poet versus a journalist, etc. Inside AEC, CAD applications, BIM applications, the same is absolutely true. So what Speckle does at its most basic, and we can go into a little presentation of this, is it takes all of those myriad different ways that people can voice their craft, put together their pieces of design in digital form, and it unifies it. It kind of makes it kind of in a common semantic language, and then makes it available to everybody. So effectively, you get it outside of applications into a central data hub, and then you can work with it in a number of different ways. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what Speckle is.
Yes, and you just forgot to tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to know.
Other than working as a master planner and architect for so long,
yeah. But you're now at Speckle and you're like advocate. So you're like, are you the first point that people when they get in touch with Speckle, are you that person they're in touch with typically, or?
Yeah. So what advocacy means for me and also for Speckle is that I get to listen to users, listen to organizations, listen to teams, listen to people like yourself, and feed that back to the team. So the people building Speckle actually deal with kind of real use cases, real feedback, because we can, as engineers, look incredibly detailed at individual APIs or whatever, but all of that does, it gives you a technical understanding at a very, very, very atomic level. It doesn't give you any insight into what does someone need to do. And so I actually have a role inwardly as an advocate, but also externally as well. So getting on calls like this, but dealing with large organizations, individual developers, and kind of developer relations with people who want to build on top of Speckle, on top of the data hub, and then individual users on our community forum, etc. So a lot of people have said, "Oh, Jonathon at Speckle," and that's kind of my moniker. No job title. I'm just, typically Jonathon at Speckle. You see me a lot.
Yes, I mean, listen, I actually now when you speak about like your role, I'm actually realizing that it's especially in the founders world and like in the startup world, it's so important because like I'm a founder myself, right? So I know that you always get some new ideas on what you would like to do, but that's not necessarily what the market needs or what people are asking for. So having that like check with the market, check with the people on what is actually necessary instead of just building something that you would think would be cool,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And wherever possible, that's what Speckle's trying to do, is solve actual real world problems rather than just a theoretical data product. So I think we're definitely grounded. And a lot of what is part of the origin of Speckle is as it is an open source project platform, a university PhD study, European funded. It's been kind of free at its core for a very, very long time. And therefore it's been around quite a long time. And part of open source is definitely successful open source is definitely community related. So we're constantly talking to as many people as possible about getting their ideas. Also, mostly, as I say, kind of working out what doesn't work for them currently in working with data in AEC.
Yeah, listen, Jonathan, like, you know, when of course, I always mention Speckle, but even my channels are somewhat limited. So I'm pretty sure students watching this and people watching this might have just heard about Speckle or have never heard, but want to check it out. And I know you have a presentation prepared. So should we maybe, should I leave the stage to you and you want to go through it? Is it going to help people understand what Speckle is and how it works and so on?
It's a short description, but it's relatively thorough. Let's hope the streaming platform fully accepts some of our GIFs and movies.
Okay, I added it to the stage. I'll be in the background, and I'll pop up if I have any questions or anything. Okay.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, thank you. And yeah, so you may have already heard me mention a couple of times referring to Speckle as a data hub for AEC, which sometimes people have heard of Speckle, but they think of it as what they first heard of it, like maybe a couple of years ago. And maybe that might be, I can get my Grasshopper model into ArchiCAD, something like that. So a lot of people have a view of what Speckle is in terms of just conversion of data from one form for another. That's entirely true, but the reason why that is true, and I'll go through some of this now, is this point of view as data at the center of what we do. And so one of those things is conversion. And broadly speaking, none of this can happen if it all sits inside your machine, sat at the end row of a desk in the basement. That's not going to get you forward in collaborating and sharing with others. So part of the reason why software as it exists for AEC is because all we've been doing is reinventing the way the things have always been. So commonly used kind of slides here of looking at what AEC was 50 years ago. Working on paper, your ideas were captured, definitely, discreetly encapsulated in a particular frame. So the frame was a piece of paper, a set of pieces of paper, a room full of pieces of paper. And then during the last, let's say 20 years, certainly between the whole time that I've been working as an architect and master planner, there is a digitization. And broadly speaking, though, the digitization, as far as we go, kind of replicates the means of production rather than the means of delivery. So effectively, what you deliver to your client or what you present to even internally in terms of team review, collaboration, tends to be encapsulated now in a digital form of what was on paper, albeit kind of a lot more heavyweight, particularly when moving more laterally, more recently into BIM, where you've got a lot of 3D data. Effectively, there is an encapsulation of what you're producing for yourselves, for your organization into that 3D model. Interesting, slides missing. So what we do inside Speckle, actually, there we go, change of order. What we do is we break down all of that. So all of those files, models, drawings, plans, GIS data, all of that sits inside the host application in one form or another. Typically what we tend to do then to get it into Speckle as a kind of a data form is to discretely break it down at an elemental level. And elements kind of mean different things to different pieces of software. So what exists inside GIS platform is not the same necessarily as sits inside Rhino, certainly, but even inside Revit, ArchiCAD, and other BIM software. But we break down that as a kind of suite of add-ons to those host applications to bring some kind of order and meaning to what exists. So from a BIM perspective, that makes a total load of sense because everything is an element or an object that has some semantic meaning already. And what we find is that across different applications, there's a sort of a similarity between these applications. So ArchiCAD and Revit, they're utterly different pieces of software, and there's a kind of commonality to it. A column is a column, but there's a Revit column and there's an ArchiCAD column. Now, this is solving a sort of a semantic problem that IFC is also solving, but IFC again replicates that kind of encapsulation of the entirety of the data set here. So what Speckle's doing is looking for commonality outside of just BIM, but also into all of those other pieces of software. And you saw all of the arrows going around and through to Speckle. Effectively, what that means is if you're pushing from or publishing from those host applications into Speckle, you do that once. And then what you're able to do is then consume that data in a number of different places. So to go back to that kind of first experience of some people know about Speckle, they think of, I can get Revit into Rhino or vice versa, or SketchUp, wherever. We're publishing into Speckle, but then we're also able to, with some of our connectors, to then consume that data as well. So I can receive that Rhino model inside Revit. And what that means, depending on what the data source and where you're receiving it, can mean different things to different people. And we're going to, I'll come on to describe some of that. But the fact that you're publishing it once and then are able to receive it in a number of different applications, and then you can spread what that kind of definition of application means. So first and foremost, kind of the most enabling thing over the last 25 years has certainly been the internet, and Speckle is now a kind of an internet first application. So that Speckle Data Hub sits in the Speckle Cloud and is able to be consumed by any browser on any device. And because in between those host applications and that web kind of interface is a whole load of code sat in a database, we also are able to receive all of that data in a number of very data specific ways of consuming things. So this is one where, let's see, animations are not supported by StreamYard. So let me see if I can flip to the other screen, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I just added the other screen on the, so it's recorded. So yeah.
So I'm actually going to present it again.
Yeah, that's all right.
Right. So this is basically, it suddenly means a bit more with motion and action here, or at least any pictures at all. So what's happening here is you see that someone's working inside Rhino and they're saying, well, I've updated my model, and someone's working alongside them or not alongside them in a completely different office in a different part of the world. They're able to receive that geometry, receive that data, and make some meaningful use of it. So effectively what you're able to do is have a kind of a discussion around 3D data. And broadly speaking, once you go beyond just receiving something that someone else is working on, then it gets a bit more sophisticated. So where we support it as best as possible, those two people now are kind of working at the same time. We call it multiplayer modeling. And that multiplayer modeling means that user on the left kind of making changes or making edits to the model, and the person on the right is able to immediately say, okay, well, there's a new version available. I'll see what that looks like. I can see what you did there. Actually, this is kind of what we want to prefer to do. Publish it back to Speckle again, and then we're able to receive. And so there's kind of an immediate, near real-time kind of experience, co-producing information and modeling. And then what that means is if you are doing that in a multiple load of different applications that aren't designed to be working together, that kind of co-authoring could happen real time, sort of at the central hub. So what we've got here is sitting kind of in the middle is the kind of the Speckle web application, and being published to by all of these different applications. So everyone, no matter what software they're running, are able to see and get notified in their basically their host application exactly what's going on. And that data in the middle is called, getting out of those host applications into the Speckle Data Hub. Means it's kind of a data extraction point of view. And once it's kind of extracted, on the left-hand side, you're seeing interaction with that in the web application. That's kind of first-class way of for just immediately on any browser, kind of making insights exactly what's going on in the scheme. On the right-hand side, you're seeing something which is Power BI but that could be Tableau or it could be Looker Studio, something like that. And you're able to make interrogations. And also, once you've got your host application data from multiple applications pushed to Speckle, you're able to do data insights across all of those different productions, including who've got time series data that isn't in any of the models, but it's coming from another data source, let's say. And all of that means nothing if it's not easy to use. So what we've been very focused on over the last, say, 2 years now is taking Speckle from it would be fair to say a nerdy product into something that's actually kind of first class and sitting on everybody's desktop. And part of the Speckle experience is, yes, it's a kind of a web application, a kind of a web first way of thinking about things, but actually for you to be most productive as a CAD author, a BIM author, is to stay in your host application as long as possible. So we're always building about interactivity with data, responsiveness, and getting that where you're at kind of point of view. All of those things kind of we kicked off before I started talking about wanting to learn from community about what those workflows are. So when we hear a way of Speckle being used, we try and record it and share. So part of the open source ethos of Speckle is they're always sharing, and this is again a kind of form of advocacy here. So not only does Speckle have a connectivity point of view, which has that kind of broad translation into conversion, but we are a communication platform as well. So collaborate, meaning what you have here is 2 different browser windows. Again, these could be on different sides of the world, but you can actually there's an experience that many people now are kind of seeing in applications and then expecting it in other applications. So whether you're using Figma or Miro or Google Docs, even being able to see what the other person is seeing is actually crucial for a conversation. So rather than sending a PDF to somebody and having them consume it and not understand it, effectively you can have a real conversation live as a web call or whatever on Microsoft Teams, but in the same time we're actually able to see I'm framing a view, and what you're able to see then is also I'm not only framing a view, I'm framing a point of view about the model that's available. And we don't all have every other person on the team software. So if you're working with a structural engineer, you're working with an MEP engineer or a landscaper, all using different pieces of software, it isn't always necessary to think, oh crap, I need to get all of that data from them, from me to them, and translate it and get it into whatever form. Because Speckle is doing that kind of unification anyway, actually then the web platform is the means for having that conversation. And the best way of collaborating and having a problem solved or a problem co-developed and iterate quickly is to bring all of that together in a kind of a unified way online. And one of the other unique features of publishing to Speckle and then consuming anywhere is that every time that you do publish to Speckle, you're making a version that exists forever. So it's an immutable data store. So there is no longer a worry whether you're using version 1, version 2 _ latest Bob's version. There's no latest version of the file. There is only the latest set of data. And not only that, is we keep all of the previous versions as well. And so what you're seeing on screen now is being able to compare what has changed between 2 pieces of information. So that's kind of useful. Let's say if I'm sharing something to you today, and then I'll share something to you next week, rather than just giving a whole load of new information. Yeah, but what do I need to coordinate with? What has actually changed? Where should I be checking in my own design or on my kind of my own exploration of what's important, what has changed? On that data platform in the background, effectively what we've been able to do now is build an entire kind of automation pipeline. Maybe you've used Zapier, or you've used some other kind of platforms that effectively say, well, there's new information come here. I've told a system, Zapier, let's say, that there's new information available. Do something with it, and then kind of a way of kind of consuming that data. In software, we call that CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. from a Speckle point of view, what we see is a point of view of continuous communication. So every event that happens on the Speckle server, whether it's adding a new comment, whether it's making a new model, uploading something, all of those events effectively you can completely listen to as webhooks. But what we've built on top of that for people who don't want to deploy a server for doing these things, a platform so that you can upload absolutely any code you want. And effectively that will run every single time new model or new information gets published. So for the time being, it's every time new data gets published, but that could, as I say, could be on every single time something's commented. So a use case here that you're seeing is effectively two people authoring models at the same time, a structural engineer and an architect, or an MEP engineer here. And so if I've changed the structure, there's an implication on other systems. So looking at clash detection here, but imagine if either of those model changes, whatever was known before, then there's a process that needs to go through to make sure that we're always staying on track. Why relate to a third party or something like that, rather than publishing information, someone else to consume it, do an aggregation, do some work, then send you back some results? Effectively, what we've been able to do is build something that can be completely in your control and in your design, kind of automated. And once you get into that mindset of I'm publishing new data, something can happen, we got sort of the boring and bit important use cases, which is about checking data quality. And effectively, not only are we able to do that checking, but we're also then able to present it back to you in the browser. But we also got then on the left-hand side is kind of a demonstration of a wind analysis using CFD. And what that means is I don't have to have specialist tools on every part of the team's set of machines, or I can actually scale the expertise of some person in the team to all of my projects. And so that kind of scalability and efficiency then of working is not only about an individual activity being automated, but also being able to completely work across every single piece of data that I'm publishing in my organization. And I think one of the things I know that some of your students and some of your friends as well are concerned about is that the extent of which, well, I've got my data. I understand what my data is doing when it's sat on my machine, or maybe on my organization's network. Less convinced about sharing all of that around the world. Well, with Speckle, you've got a unique opportunity of being in like probably the most control over that data that you can have in kind of cloud space. But before talking about the technicalities and the whys and wherefores, which we can have a discussion about, that total control means that you can build entirely custom solutions to your problems, your organization, that are relevant to what you need to do. So you can build at a kind of a data level first, an entire set of applications. So on the left-hand side, we've got Henning Larsen doing sort of a public engagement application around, but in fact, both of these applications are around carbon footprint. On the left, it's just we've made some decisions about what to do in our neighborhood. What is the implication here in terms of total kind of environmental impact? On the right-hand side, again, both of these are publicly available. Arup produced an application that effectively every time you publish new data to Speckle, you get a complete breakdown of exactly where my carbon budget is being consumed. A bit more on topic in terms of the course that you've been going through on AI, or at least machine learning point of view, is because we are able to, with Speckle, get data out of any of those applications and bring it into a kind of a central repository, do merges and data merges, etc. Beyond that, that's a resource for then your own organization to do whatever you want with it, to feed in, let's say, your own models or your own kind of AI learning point of view. These are both, again, open sourced examples hosted on GitHub and shared here. On the left-hand side, as I mentioned, the Speckle commenting system, everything has an event. So effectively that was being able to be fed into here we go, LangChain, Weave8 and Chat OpenAI. And effectively then there's a conversation that can be had with the BIM model. So what's interesting here is that you're not having a conversation specifically around the context of the data that's in that model, because obviously the model says this is a ceiling, this is a floor, this is a wall. But beyond that, the ability for using all of these technologies and stitching them together, here a PDF of the building specification was uploaded. And so what the conversation that's going on in the chatbot here is able to say is, okay, beyond just what this stuff is made of, I have a particular question of what is the use of this room, feed that back, and is the material of that room adequate for serving the purpose? So I think there's a conversation here around it being a GP consulting surgery, therefore there's an acoustic requirement. Do those materials kind of meet up? And effectively, we aren't building an AI product at Speckle. What we're building is the equipment for AI products to be built, because the AI thrives on data. And on the right hand side, and a much more kind of direct usefulness for an architect working with the scheme that they're working on is repivot my data and tabulate it in such a form as it does something. On the point of view of control, because we're open source, effectively anyone could take all of that Speckle data, whether we're hosting it on our server, you can actually download that and host it on your own server. You can spin up your own server on any on-premises or on cloud devices you want. We've built it deliberately to be cloud agnostic, so you can host it anywhere. There are advantages to hosting it with us because we're experts in keeping all of that data infrastructure up. But if you're a particular organization that wants to or requires to have a kind of a long-term, kind of like 20-year view backup of all your data, then you can, spin up that Speckle server and it will last as long as you can keep the lights on. We ourselves, we host data centers around the world so that you're able to specify where your Speckle data is living. This is something that's basically, in time we're having this conversation, the team right now are launching this live on our main website. So effectively, if you're working in the US, you can say my data is in the US. If I'm working in Australia, my data is in Australia. Or if we're working on a project in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we can both be working in the US and in the EU, but the data is sat in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Places all around the world are starting to be very savvy about, in some ways, about where data survives and where data lives, regardless of the kind of the usefulness of some of those data sovereignty rules. Speckle's built and ready to go. And all of that sits inside workspaces, which is now moving away from just the kind of the nuts and bolts of how Speckle works to how you organize teams around data, how you organize collaborators as well. So we've always had an individual project, which allows you total control of who can see that data, but now you can start doing that from an organizational point of view as well. Won't need to get into too much about this. And then we get into, we're rebuilding Speckle from the ground up, starting probably a couple of months ago, really focusing on data extraction as a point of view, as a kind of first and foremost way of working, rather than going straight for, okay, I need to get my ArchiCAD model into GIS. How does that work? Rather than thinking about that, we're thinking really how to get the data quality inside the hub as high as possible, the highest level of fidelity. And then what we're working through, kind of that full suite of connectors that we have to then consume that data. What are the meaningful workflows? What does it mean to share ArchiCAD data with GIS, let's say? And I won't go into any more detail about this, but we can have a conversation if you like, Stepan, around anything else. So what I can do in the meantime, if I stop there and I present, a lot of that is a bit abstract. So what I'm going to come into is share the screen again.
Yeah,
and here what I'm sharing now is, this is the Speckle web application as it exists. So you come into the front page of app.speckle.systems. And all of your work and all of your data is organized in individual projects. And now I've just said that projects are then able to be consumed or kind of organized in workspaces. So if I come into the AI and AEC workspace, inside here is a project called Clubhouse. And this is where I'm going to start quickly showing you sort of some of the advantages of not working in individual files, but talking about kind of fit for purpose models. So let's say I'm an architect or an interior designer working on all of the furniture in a project. I can be publishing that to the same Speckle project as the structural engineer. So it happens to be that I'm laying out, what has it got here? Play equipment, reception desk, and gym equipment. So inside that Speckle project, then you're able to break it down according to who should be authoring things, who should be consuming things, and in what order. So to be kind of more relevant to a conversation in AEC, if I am the architect working on the reception desk area, do I have to wait for the structural engineer or the MEP engineer to finish the plant room? Probably not. But rather than wait for all of that model, the entirety of the model to have a sign off in order to start work and start collaborating, actually, we could all be working not only just breaking it down to furniture, but let's say reception area is a project, and we share that between all of the multi-parties, and we're able to constantly and kind of more quickly iterate over that. And if you're breaking down models into, let's say, fabric and interiors, I can look at not only individual models, so let's say just look at the kind of facade fins, but actually what I can do beyond that is I can say, well, actually the facade is a collaborative endeavor as well. So here we've got those facade fins and also the kind of overall kind of glazing units or whatever. And we can also then say, well, the entirety of the building, the fabric of the building, I can now bring all of that together again. So this could have been authored in Revit, ArchiCAD, Rhino, etc., all in the above. And the experience of that coordination and federation of that can be completely controlled by everyone who has access to the browser and has access to the project. We go through some different ways of viewing the model, manipulation, and otherwise. I really enjoy Edges mode. We just launched this week, I think. So if you go to an individual element, let's say stair, that in itself is a piece of data that is not just one object inside that stair. Then you go, this was made in Rhino, it's in this stair, let's say, and actually we could be just looking at just those rails. So if I were able to say that, now I'm just looking at those rails. And the same then is true of any part of the building, any part of the data. You're not only able to do very discrete queries against the database from at a data layer, but also online. And also one of the things that we can do inside there, well, this doesn't have any particular data on it. Let's say we're able to say, let's reset those filters. If I come back to, let's say, fins, let's see if there's any data on those. Probably not. Let's say that there was a kind of a unique ID for each of those, then we're color coding it. We're able to then say, well, actually, I can get information out and do some kind of data interrogation on the model as it exists. If I come back to viewing the entire project altogether, not only are we able to look at that entirety model while it's loading up individual parts, one of the things that we've also recently integrated is, and this is kind of a nice to have here, but effectively you're able to say is, I don't know, let's say made of ice. There's probably, if you're into AI prompt engineering, you probably can do a much better job of this. But if you just press go and render, if I come back to one I've made before, let's see, expand that out. So there's the flat process color version, the Blade Runner version, the tropical island version, etc., etc. So this is a recent integration that we built into Speckle. That render is still going. Effectively, that's happening using visual data to generate an image. And you've seen other examples here. What's more interesting inside this model is able to say, well, because I've been modeling all of these facade fins, well, actually, from a manufacturing point of view, it's great that they're all looking the same, but how similar are they? So inside here, we've also then got a type analysis, and what that type analysis is saying, well, really, you should have as much unification for this to kind of make your manufacturing process as efficient as possible. You can say, well, broadly speaking, they're all of a couple of different types. I can see that there's 4 fin types, but these 2 are outliers. So what's happened here is I've published a new model from the in this case Rhino, and published that, and Automate in the background, you can see the little donut going on here. Automate has been running and saying, actually, yeah, there are some results to be looking here, and this is the outcome. So that happens to be one use case of exactly how Automate is being used to take that kind of grunt work, or kind of the kind of boring checking work out of your hands, so that you can actually be running it and get on with something else in your life. That's about it for live demo. I wouldn't go into like actually publishing the data from Rhino directly here, because it's just too many screens to start sharing. And I've done a lot of talking now.
Yeah, wow. I mean, listen, I haven't had a demo yet where it was like just you going into it, explaining everything, and answering so many questions that I might have, not only me, that a person might have while watching
Mhm.
this. Wow. So I'm amazed because, like, let me then. So okay, before I get started with my questions, let me ask something. If
Mhm.
people are like, okay, this part is very interesting, where do I go to learn more? Where is that place?
Mhm. I guess we've got a couple of different places to go. Broadly speaking, we've got our main website has just been relaunched. Lots of things I'm mentioning have just been relaunched. We had our annual conference in London. Well, it seems a lifetime ago, but it was just like 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks ago in central London, and we announced a whole load of new things. One of those was our new website. So we had a website that did a pretty good job, but it was very focused. And I think that it's all part of this journey that I've kind of described, of going from a tool for nerds, let's say, or kind of people like me. I'm denigrating myself here. To now communicating for people who just want to get their jobs done. So you can use Speckle without having to be at the kind of that nerd level, because I'm just pressing a blue button and getting work done. So speckle.systems is our main website, which now goes into a number of different concepts and kind of ways of working. That's kind of the best entry point. Another thing is to just, if you've got a host application, let's say you're using Rhino, download a connector and start pushing data to Speckle. You make an account at app.speckle.systems. It's that easy. You just press the blue button. That's kind of where we've been driven, to make it as easy as possible. And then, because the kind of web is the kind of the unifying technology we all use, published a Speckle, and a little blue button then says, would you like to view that on the web, like 5 seconds later? And that's usually the aha moment for most people. And then once you're going from there, then you can go, let's break this model down and look into what the elements are of a roof, and just start exploring the data that you had put in whatever application you're working in, and then seeing how you can actually then ask questions of yourself in a very accessible format.
All right. So you're essentially saying that your new website, speckle.systems, is the best place to go. And
Yep.
I also know you have a blog with many use cases and videos you mentioned also, right?
That's also hosted on that website now, so it's all integrated. So there's the ability to look into kind of the broad concepts, but also get down and dirty into one of the things I really appreciate on our blog is the amount of times we're able to demonstrate how other people have been using Speckle. So an organization, let's say we were working with Henning Larsen, I can describe exactly how they used Speckle to make their lives easier. That's usually the the kind of the blog post I like most of all. The second thing I like most of all is where I get to really kind of nerd out. And let's say one of those AI tools, getting into, well, stitching together Weave8 and LangChain and OpenAI. And we have long form kind of tutorials on that as well. And also we have a YouTube channel, and also we have a community forum where people are showcasing what they're up to. And also a very responsive side of the community forum was a help, something's not working, or how would I best do this? We have a kind of internal target of, let's say, industry beating response times on our community forum. So if you have any question, whether that's philosophical or very technical, we're able to answer that as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
and that's at speckle.community. But
yes, and let's stay on the note of a community for a second, because I just want to maybe clarify something for people who are still, let's say, here, but maybe like get the idea, get that Speckle is a lot of things, as you usually also say. Speckle can do a lot of things, but I want to play the role of a person who doesn't know much about Speckle and wants to figure out why is this the right thing for them right now, because I'll be honest. When I spoke, even for 3 years ago, when I spoke with architects and engineers, nobody knew about Speckle. But as soon as I came to like hackathons where people are kind of semi-developers or they're working with technology in the AEC space, they get it. They're like in love with Speckle, So I know that, just to say, so community is very strong. I know that you have meetups, and you also have very good social media and like communication, with different parties. I know this, but I want to a bit go on the side of people who don't know, who are still confused. So what I'm about to say, I want you to check and maybe like correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
So as a general idea, I understand Speckle as let's say it's a data hub, but the way it works is that you are not limited to your own software, meaning that if I work in AutoCAD, I need to work in AutoCAD. If I work in Revit, like Rhino connection is very complicated. I need add-ins, I need plugins, I need scripts, I don't know what. What you're essentially saying is that Jonathon can work in Rhino, I can work in Revit, somebody else can work in Excel or SAP 2000 or whatever, and we can all work on the same project.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So there's a number of different problems that you can solve, but let's focus on exactly that. So rather than, and this is kind of reflecting really on the kind of problems we have in the industry, is that we all, for very good reasons, work in tools that are fit for us. One way of solving that is to say, well, actually, everyone on the team has to use the same software. Well, that works for the person who is like the most proficient in it. Like, so I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with Revit, but I'm going to name that as kind of being stipulated. Well, the only way we can solve this problem possibly is to everybody use Revit. And suddenly the steel fabricator is saying, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure that I don't swear on this, but that's not good for me, right? I have a production pipeline. I really need to be using Tekla, because Tekla's got an amazing design through to fabrication pipeline, and I can share with literally the shop floor. So actually, if I'm using Tekla data, that makes sense. Why don't we all use Tekla? Well, Tekla's not going to be good for your MEP design. So that's the kind of fundamental problem, without even mentioning Speckle. And the other main problem is I'm working on my design, or my interpret. It's everybody's design. It's a joint project. I'm working on it in my office and with the latest information that you sent me. Now, I think it's the latest, but from your point of view, you're publishing every single day, because the architect always does that. They come up with way too much information for the project team. And I have to respond to that. Well, what am I responding to? What am I changing? Where does it impact what I've already done? So the ability to work side by side is something that Speckle's really built for, right from the very first line of kind of Dimitri's PhD that kind of birthed Speckle, was around how do we make sure that this is not a problem anymore? It is still a kind of a problem for so many people. So what Speckle definitely trying to do is make that kind of, we called it multiplayer modeling, where people were authoring at the same time, but actually contextual design. So always having reference to what you're working on while I'm working. Not some version that you sent 3 weeks ago, actually you'd sent 2 weeks ago, but I've only got the 3-week-old version. These are real problems on real people's lives. A lot of wasted work not having the correct information. That's aside from it being in different formats and different softwares. Then you compound that problem of it all being in different formats and different softwares. There are a number of different ways to try and solve that, but they tend to be, as I say, kind of still built on that kind of file-based approach. I've decided as the architect, I'm going to share with you something that's formulated according to this. From a point of view as a steel fabricator, no, I actually just want all of those steel fabricatable elements in the building. So why not make a query? We've all used Google now for 15 years. Show me all of the steel beams, and I get that, and I can consume that in the software that I'm fit for purpose. And so that's really what Speckle is an enabling tool for those kind of problems. Beyond that, though, once you've then centralized all that data, then for people who are the people who get really excited at hackathons, the world's unlimited.
Okay, let me reflect on those two things or those two problems you've said, because by now, like by the time I put this demo in the course, the students have heard me rant about like how we go from 3D to 2D as we go to take a step back, and then we always send files on Outlook, and then it's over 25 megabytes, so we need WeTransfer, so we call it final V2, final V3 version, and so on. They heard that, and they also heard that I just keep reading these reports all over the AEC, essentially saying that number one problem is the lack of training and lack of skills in employees. And then so what you're essentially saying is that technology as like the app that you're using is a secondary. What is primary are your skills in whatever tools you're using, right? So your skills and then your technology, meaning that you can work in anything that feels comfortable for you, and you can work together. Yes. But let me understand that maybe a bit more on that, let's say, the technology side. The reason I'm asking this, because I want people to really understand Speckle, that it's not a modeling tool. It's more like a connection hub. So in essence, you share your models from Rhino, Revit, like typical programs. You have, what is it, 35 connectors, and you're building like these next gen ones. But like, what is it? More than 30 applications, right?
If you include reading and writing, then it's about 30, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can push that data to Speckle. It sits in a Speckle format, but you can't model there. You can communicate, you can see, you can do renders that you just showed of AI, but you can't model it, right? You can comment and then speak with teams again, right?
Yeah. So effectively what you can do is, let's reflect on a couple of things. Okay,
sure.
Lots of reflection. Let's say there are two people working in different pieces of software. I can receive your Revit model in my Rhino model and continue my Rhino model. You can receive my Rhino model inside your Revit model and make changes in your Revit model. Or, and this is where you get into kind of the top tier of interoperability side of things, is we also have technology that's getting better. It's not like perfectly there yet, where actually I know what your Revit model library is, all of your parameters, all of your different families that you're working with. I can consume that data inside Rhino, and I can start authoring my blocks and my groups and all of the stuff that I know how to do amazingly in Rhino, and start authoring it and mapping it so that when you receive that, my model that I'm continuing to build in SketchUp or in Rhino, receive it in Revit, and it's coming in as Revit data. So then what you're getting is directly like fully native stuff inside your host application, if that's what you want. That is what a lot of people and there's other options for this, of getting Rhino data into Revit and then it becoming Revit data. That's a use case for actually quite a narrow band of people that we've discovered. And there's an alternative. You can use Rhino inside Revit for amazing kind of BREP support inside Revit. What's not happening, though, is any record of what has been shared or what has been manipulated. So there are workflows where I start in Rhino, I send it to Revit, you do Revit stuff and send it back, and then I received it in Rhino. It's kind of ping pong and tennis, where we're both authoring stuff. The number of people who actually want to do that is very, very low, because what we're all trying to work on is something that's where the tool is like my craftsman's kit. You know, I work really, really well in Rhino. I work really, really well in Revit. Why not stay there and just let the other people who are working in different things continue to work in their fit for purpose tools? And we're finding a lot more people are getting a lot more value out of being the freedom of contextually receiving that information alongside the way that they're working. The number of people who need to actually take ArchiCAD geometry and data, send it to Revit, edit it in Revit, and then send it back to ArchiCAD is almost nil, actually. Even though that was a problem that Speckle was trying to solve, we've decided that's not really the problem that we should be solving. Just having as many people being able to work at the same time, like quickly, is a much better problem to solve, actually.
Okay, yeah. So let's stay on that for a second, because okay, so I know that Speckle has a myriad of mini use cases. One of the use cases you mentioned at some point earlier when we spoke is that if you have a Revit 2023 model, you can get it to Revit 2022 model, which in Revit natively you can't do. Like, you can't open a newer model in an older software, but you can do it through Speckle, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a mini use case that might be interesting to some people. What you're saying here is that your main, let's say, sales point right now, or like getting people onboarded, is the collaboration within Speckle. So if I understand you correctly, like the main target audience for this would be multidisciplinary teams or multinational companies that work in many countries but want to work on same projects together. And even project managers within one team, and then have a small project that, everybody can work in whatever. But they have they can control, they can see everything there, right?
Yeah, that's the kind of the unwritten about message about Speckle over too long, in fact, is that the fact that I can instantly see what my, let's say, a project manager, I can see what the architect, engineer, MEP engineer, landscaper is doing today, bring it all together today in a view. They don't have to get out of their lives. They don't have to arrange a meeting. They don't have to do anything. They can carry on working. And I can see what's up with that reception desk area. Is anyone working on that? Has that changed? I've got left some comments in the web. I can see that, this is something we wanted to address. I can see it's addressed. I can tick that off. So there's kind of that web first way of collaborating is actually a huge win for more and more teams on that kind of multidisciplinary team point of view. To the point where it only has to be collaboration. We're also speaking with, and I won't mention names, we're talking about very, very large multinational organizations that, for them, the way that they execute buildings, and this is maybe in the contractor space or in the executive architect space, wherever it is, they are in possession of, because they've been working for so long, a lot of data, a lot of artifacts, and their kind of key way that they differentiate themselves against their competitors is their know-how, the ability of, I know how to execute a design, get it to built, and I can get it on time and on budget. How have I done that? Well, I've got a load of information that says this is how it's done. And so they're actually using Speckle to ingest, let's say, 15 years of BIM data into a central repository, and they are training ML models so that they can say, this is the Acme Limited way of doing this. So then if you're then to put that on the other point of view, let's say you're a large engineering point of view, and you have let's say a junior engineer saying, well, actually, I think I've come up with this solution, the structural frame here, and this is the specification I've put to the steel beams for this high-rise tower, let's say. And without being particularly sophisticated, you can say, well, 95% of your colleagues would have made those beams shallower. Do you want to look at that again? And if you can then feed, let's say I'm in ETABS or I'm in structural engineering software X. I published a Speckle, something has triggered, an automate has said, okay, new data has arrived. I'm going to compare that with my institutional knowledge, which is everything I've ever done. Say, these beams do not match that kind of institutional model. And then you're able to view that in the host application. So as an engineer, I've not had to leave ETABS. And suddenly I'm saying, well, what you did is not quite right. Maybe you want to check it. Oh, and then if you feed that and saying, I'm now not only looking at institutional knowledge, I'm looking at what the other parties, talking about clash detection, but actually coordination is way beyond clash detection. It's like, you've specified a window, they haven't specified a window. I can do that comparison automatically. So all of that is sort of not particularly too far beyond kind of the normal AEC engineer and architect understanding of the world, and being able to build tools and kind of infrastructure to make their lives easier. I've long said, every time people ask me what I do, I've said my ambition is to have people go home on time. And this is kind of fundamental of kind of a point of view of just making everything more efficient. So you can look at efficiency as being more profitable, but actually there's a human scale to all of these problems. I think there's an interview with Dimitri, the founder of Speckle, who said the reason why Speckle exists is because he wasted like 3 sleepless nights working on interior design, when in actual fact the structural problem, the structural engineer had changed the scheme while he didn't know about it. So, these are human problems as opposed to just being, technological problems.
Yeah. Actually, listen, I have many questions. So if it's okay with you, I would just like to continue with a couple of them.
Sure.
Yeah. So because, and I want to take the more skeptical side of Speckle. So first of all, if I'm, let's say I have joined this course, or I'm listening to this, and I'm not even in 3D yet, or like my company is trying to test some 3D, like, we're just getting into BIM. I mainly joined because I work with AutoCAD, and most of my project partners work in AutoCAD. Do I need Speckle? Like, what's your advice there? Like, why would I need it, and what for?
So we actually support AutoCAD, Civil 3D, OpenBridge, Open Building, MicroStation. So CAD is definitely still in the mix, and the largest projects in the world are still solved with CAD and GIS. Why would you want to publish to Speckle rather than, let's say, send a DWG, because that's a kind of a unified format? Well, you can do that, but then you're into is it the latest? Is it the kind of the fundamental? And it's bound with, did I put in the right place? Is my paper space not layout space? Is it model space? Blah, blah, blah. There were interoperability problems way before BIM. And actually, the fact that you're sending to Speckle every single time you send, it keeps it forever, is kind of really interesting from a point of view, is because I'm not only on the server able to see this person, Stepan has sent new data. I can also say, well, actually, Jennifer's actually received that, and that's an event on the server as well. There is no, I didn't see the email event. I can check, this is not about checking and policing. This is, do I know that Jennifer received that last information? Did she actually find, when she received it in MicroStation from AutoCAD, was she working on the correct information? And did she take the right stuff? All of those things are scrutable because it's in data form as opposed to sitting on people's machines.
Okay, so this was from perspective of somebody who's still in 2D, and this was a very nice explanation. What about somebody who's like, let's say they might be in 3D, but they're like wondering about technical limitations? Because you're saying, you can just push all the data, but is it really all the data? Like when it comes to, I'm a Revit guy, right? So I know that, like, is it all the categories? Is it something missing? And what about different software? Is there any like a list of what is supported, what is not?
This is part of where our new next generation connectors point of view is. When I said that we're focusing on total perfection of data extraction, that's our ambition. It only goes so far, and it's kind of fair to say, if the Revit API, you're a Revit guy, doesn't support extraction of X, and we all know that the Revit API in 2025 has only just added the ability to make ceilings, for instance. That's kind of mind-blowing. But from a data extraction point of view, that's what we want to get to as kind of high fidelity as possible. The other thing that we've noticed that people, the first thing they do is they download Speckle, they find the biggest model they've got and send to Speckle, and it's, it takes ages. Yeah, but how real is that as a kind of experience? It's something that you want to do and see, because I want my model in the 3D viewer. But actually, when you want to say, well, I need to work with the facade engineer to work out where the structs are at the edge of the slab so I can feed that back to the structural engineer. We only need to be sending a slab edge. And suddenly what your conversation around is in a set of maybe 2D elements. like a line around the perimeter of a building so that the landscaper and the architect can say, well, this is the falls of the land towards the building. This is where we need to put the drains. This is where the door is. Therefore, it needs to be. These sorts of things can actually be exchange of very simplistic geometry, and actually working better and working smarter is not about the ability to send huge quantities of data to each other. You probably want to be really focused and send less. That's a slightly philosophical point, or kind of as well as a technical point. We probably fill all our lives with too much noise, and so sending data around is also part of that.
I agree. Hey, listen, I have 3 more questions, and if none other pop up, but I think that from like let me say this, because this it's a very specific question. It's not necessarily that you're gonna know what to answer, what to say, but I just want to hear your thoughts on this. So I was recently at a conference, and I was speaking with this CEO of a big company. Like I think they're like 2,000 people, and they're using a multitude of softwares, a multitude of from structural engineering, MEP, designers, interior, like everything included. And he was, like they want to work with me as like an AI consultant, AI specialist. All cool, great. And then he said that we're making this big investment for 2025. We're gonna move, like they're using Revit here and there, but like they're gonna move everything to ACC, Autodesk Construction Cloud. Everything's gonna be in the cloud. Everything's gonna be amazing. And I just, like, out of curiosity, I asked, "Have you heard about Speckle?" And he's like, "No, no. What is that?" And then I explained that he doesn't need all of this massive investment. He can do it for like a fraction of the price, essentially, by keeping the people in this, instead of spending training hours and getting people onboarded and cloud credit and whatnot. And I could just see, like, he was completely confused on what's the next step, because he had this clear idea of like, ACC is the way, but I just think that he didn't know that there's a better way or a different way to do it. So let's say my question is more of a, if I was an employee at a company and my CEO, or like, I'm not sure what my CEO knows or doesn't know, but this guy is a smart guy. He's relatively young as a CEO as well, but he didn't know about Speckle. So what would you advise me as an employee of this company? How can I approach this guy? How can I, like, educate? Because I heard about Speckle. I've spent an hour listening to the two of us. What could I do?
And this is the fundamental that we're trying to address in my team, part of the community team, as it was called. There are, well, how would you do it? Well, demonstrating that you can save time is usually the biggest win. If you can say that I'm saving time and being more productive, like they aren't necessarily the same thing. I'm able to get something done better. That's also a huge win, and starting to really say, putting metrics on some of these things, which is why I like the case study blogs I mentioned so much. We had a blog where someone was I would say a BIM manager in a main contractor. And he said, well, I've got my reporting down of progress of manufacture. So they work on prefabricated facade panels, let's say. So they receive a design model. They're able to put that into a design model. They send that to the factory. They can see in the factory, these things are being produced. They're also in control of the site. So they're receiving on the site. And I can see the status of every part of every one of those panels, right? So, and he was able to say, well, using Speckle and using Power BI and using, I think, I'm trying to remember, field notes or some application that said basically someone on site saying, yes, this has arrived. Yes, it's installed. And kind of pinning all of those data points together and visualizing in Power BI sounds, Power BI is both a kind of a dumb and powerful tool at the same time. In terms of what the value you can get out of it, they were able to say, if they were doing that as a manual process, without doing data stuff, data joins and data kind of pipelines, they were able to save like hundreds of hours, because about, crap, there's data here, I need to put it in Excel, and I need to put a different form of Excel, and then I need to take that data. And that's not necessarily a Speckle problem. It just happens to be that all of that data can go through Speckle, because we all support Excel data. You talked about 2D or 3D. We're also supporting like Excel data. Whether you're also getting sensors in your room feeding what the temperature is, that can be fed into Speckle as well, because we're completely neutral. And that's different to, and I'm not here to make a pitch of Speckle versus ACC, but that's certainly something that Speckle does that ACC doesn't. Like we're data agnostic. And once you're data agnostic and able to consume all of these things and consume it and then publish it as well, as I say, kind of from the people who are at hackathon level and kind of get excited. But your question was, how do I convince the CEO if I'm a lower down? Just proving it and demonstrating it, because it's free to use. You download it, you start making an account, and you can say, this is what I can achieve. Sometimes we've had enterprise customers come to us literally because the first time they've seen Speckle was on an iPad in a cab on the way to the airport, right? Because someone's working still in the office. You're going to a client presentation in another country. They're sending the model. There it is on your iPad. That was the moment they said, okay, brilliant. I'll go and speak to these Speckle guys and get an enterprise account.
Okay, yeah. So your answer is basically be pragmatic, meaning that prove that you can automate something, that it's much easier, better, faster, whatever. You might not necessarily know the costs associated with ACC or Revit and so on, but you know your work, you know your tasks, and you know what you can, let's say, avoid or do faster, do more productive.
Yeah.
Yes. When it comes to
to that point of making the pitch, effectively, what you're translating that as, but prove it to yourself first. Like, get home on time. What's the solution to get me home on time? It's using this tool over here because it's easily available, doesn't take any like technical understanding really to set it up, and I can already make my life better. And actually, I then speak to my colleague next to me, and then him, and then we've got a team working with it, and then you're indispensable. That's kind of a pressure point of view, like build a pitch from that point of view, rather than wasting time actually counting those hours and making a kind of ROI pitch. That works too, but being indispensable is always a huge win.
Yeah, I love that you have this overarching idea of like getting people home on time. I love that, just as a side comment. But as like my primary comment, you can say, thinking about this person in this perspective, that this scenario, I also had an example where there was a story that one of my, let's say, close friends, he wanted to push Speckle in his company. And he would come to his manager, and he would explain everything that this is better, it works like this, it's very easy, we can do it. And then the manager said, no, we can't do it, you can do it. And what if you leave the job in 3 months? So I think that, just as let's say, my side comment would be to make it so that the whole team understands how easy it is, right, to log on. So maybe let me stay on that note of like getting started with Speckle. Do I need to get in touch with you, or like I just go to Speckle Systems? Do I need to download something? Do I need to make an account? How does it practically work?
So the kind of the 3 steps, and I think the team are working on making this even easier. But right now, you go to app.speckle.systems, you make an account. You can make a login and password, or you can use a Gmail account that just says, this is who I am. That account then enables you to download a connector. And 2 ways of doing that. But let's say you download Speckle Manager. And what Speckle Manager does, it keeps track of all of the software that you've got, which we support, and say, hey, I've got a connector for that. So if you've got Rhino, it can say, install Speckle for Rhino. And then boom, you've got Speckle available in Rhino. Select an element and send it to Speckle. Just all of that, the manager, the account online, and the connector in the host applications, all tied and kind of as easy to pin together as possible. I mean, it really is just start pushing data very easily.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you for explaining that. So listen, I also know that recently, maybe what was it, a month ago, you raised a new round of 12.5 million euros, if I'm not mistaken. So I won't be asking you about like how like, is there anybody else who believes? Because obviously there's a lot of people who believe in Speckle, and that's why they're ready to invest so much. So I won't ask you about this. About like the financial health, you can say. What I will ask you about is the roadmap. What is next for Speckle? Are these like next gen connectors? Is it like more community driven, let's say, initiatives? What do you have in mind?
Next gen connectors is a huge part of it, for kind of that making the data you've got in the hub as top notch as possible. But interestingly enough, the next enabler for that CEO point of view is to take it out of Speckle being for the hobbyist, let's say, because of that ease of use of being able to just make an account with my Gmail account, and suddenly I've got access to being able to egress all of my company's data to myself. We've built now kind of what I just briefly mentioned at the end of my slide presentation, workspaces. And what workspaces allows you to do is to say, well, now I'm tied into my company's SSO. Actually, I'm in Australia and I want my data to be in Sydney. All of those things are now possible as part of that workspaces kind of Speckle Pro kind of way of talking about things. Part of the ACC appeal, funnily enough, is people trust what they can pay for, and workspaces is a paid for product. It's a weird kind of irony that, oh, well, Speckle's for free, therefore, what guarantee is there that Speckle's going to be around next month? Well, fundraising is one of those things, but actually something that's more reassuring to someone who's operating the information management for their organization is, okay, I'm paying for it, therefore, I should be getting something for what I'm paying for. And that kind of contractual relationship actually, yeah, I think ironically, you could be charging $1 and that kind of would be working point of view. And that's our kind of roadmap, is higher quality, ease of use, no kind of groundbreaking new features, except that there probably will be some.
Okay.
I think once you start talking about, okay, well, let's give up on the idea, well, not give up. Let's not try and say that every application can talk 100% fluently with another application, but actually what we've got is a huge amount of data that everybody has. Building products on top of that is going to be an awful lot easier than trying to say, I can author GIS data in Blender, right? That's a kind of a theoretical possible, but a use case of maybe 5 people in the world. Really, the next few stages, what we're going to put that investment money into is actually becoming a profitable company. So we're not looking for, the spectacular exits or anything, or the kind of the VC stuff that I don't really like getting involved with. We want to be a revenue raising company. So part of that is, it is a first-class data product for enterprise. From a user's perspective, we want to make it as absolutely easy to use as possible. The other thing that next-gen connectors do is that the user interface is incredibly easy. It's like, when I mentioned it's the big blue button, that's literally it, the big blue button. You're getting results of Automate saying the data quality parameters are not quite right, blah, 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 in your host application. So you're able to put your user strings in Rhino, press the blue button, and you get the results immediately. You're kind of within 15 seconds. Those sorts of quality of life is really no, let's say, headline news, but that's what we're focused on for the next foreseeable.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the vision with us, Jonathan. Listen, I have, like, personally, I could go on and on with questions. I also know, like, before I make before I make any purchase, I also go through, like, do I need this, or is it like nice to have, and then it can sway my purchase in a different direction. And what I typically do, I do a lot of analysis. I go to the website, I check it out, I see what the people are saying. And you say this is also the best way to get started with Speckle. Test it out. It's no commitment. See if it works for you. See if it brings the benefits of seamless collaboration, of understanding what's the newest, of working across, like, interdisciplinary apps and so on. So you say it's as easy speckle.systems or app.speckle.systems, and test it out, right?
Absolutely. And the annual conference SpeckleCon that we just had last month, we did record a number of great presentations from not us, but from actual people who are integrating Speckle into their work lives. Incredibly interesting, broad spread from state railways through to people like doing timber manufacturing in Rhino, direct to factory manufacturer. So a couple of those, they will be all uploaded to YouTube. We'll be publishing a kind of an anthology of it on the blog as well. So that's coming soon. I'm not sure when this will be available to your students, but yeah, from our point of view, this is coming soon.
Awesome. Listen, Jonathan, as I've said, I have many questions, but I think it's better to maybe leave them for students to ask you themselves, or to check it out and start testing, and then make it more practical. So yeah, I don't know if you have any last notes, but this has been, what is it, hour and 15 minutes? Amazing. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Absolute pleasure. So any questions, I live on speckle.community. So post anything you want there. There's also people like sharing philosophical ideas about the future of the world. So everything from Revit sucks to the future of the world gets discussed at speckle.community. So encourage you all to come join us there too.
Amazing. Thank you once again, Jonathon. I really owe you one, a big one for sure. Yes. And thank you everybody for watching, and see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.